Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of the Atlanta Global Studies Center and the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research, I'd like to welcome you to GSU's Global Career Series. This series brings together globally minded organizations to talk to students about the rewarding opportunities that await them. We are very fortunate that Lauren Kent Delaney from the Carter Center and Harrison Welsheimer from the Peace Corps are here with us today to talk about internships, employment, global skills, and professional development. Lauren Kent Delaney joined the Carter Center as Director of Educational Programs in 2005. She oversees the marketing, recruitment, selection, and supervision of approximately 110 interns and graduate assistants each year that work in peace, health, and operations at the center. Prior to her position at the Carter Center, she was a part of the Division of Campus Life at Emory University for 15 years and also held positions at Georgia Tech and Arizona State University. Lauren earned her undergraduate degree from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater in education and her master's degree in student personnel administration in higher education from Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. Harrison Welsheimer has always loved visiting Georgia, especially when it means escaping his home state, Wyoming, during its brutal winters. Now he's thrilled to move to Atlanta as a field-based Peace Corps recruiter. Harrison was a hard-working saxophone player and graduated from the University of Wyoming with a Bachelor's of Music in 2011. But Peace Corps pulled on his heartstrings. A long-term dream was fulfilled when he shipped off to Cambodia in July 2019. As COVID-19 spread across the globe, Harrison was evacuated in late March 2020. However, his devotion to Peace Corps and its mission is stronger than ever. Nowadays, he spends his free time swing dancing and playing on the rocks with his mountain bike. Welcome, Lauren and Harrison. And before I turn it over to Ms. Kent Delaney and Mr. Welsheimer, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this session is being recorded. We ask that you keep your mics muted to reduce any noise during the presentation. There will be about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A after the presentations. Feel free to type your questions in the chat at any time. And now I'll turn it over to our esteemed speakers. Ms. Kent Delaney will begin with you. Oh, Lauren, you're on mute.
So sorry, I said I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see my presentation. All right, so thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm excited to be here today. The Carter Center was founded by former President Jimmy Carter. He's our 39th president, and he also won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 for his post-presidency work. The Carter Center is located downtown Atlanta. I'm sure most of you realize that. The museum and library is a part of the National Archives. The Carter Center is adjacent to that facility. We are a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. We're affiliated with Emory University. We have peace programs, health programs, and then the operational areas that support that work. The principles of the Carter Center have been consistent for the last 30 years or so. Essentially, we say that we're focused on action. We don't duplicate other people's work. So people will ask why we don't have an HIV/AIDS project or something like that. It's because that work is already being done and there's no reason for us to replicate or utilize those resources if they've already been being addressed. We are committed to being neutral, and that's really important to us because we need to be invited to any country where we're going to work, whether it's peace programs or health programs. And ultimately, we believe that people can improve their own lives if they're given access to the resources. We currently have 4 peace programs, and I'm going to touch on each of these briefly. Right now, we have conflict resolution projects in Mali, Sudan, and Syria. In Mali and Sudan, we've been working to resolve conflicts in remote areas because those areas are impacted by disease, and our health programs cannot get in there to work if it's not safe. In Mali, we also were fortunate enough to be invited to be independent observers for the 2015 peace agreement. In Syria, we've been involved there for several years, first through the Syrian war. Right now we have staff that will track unexploded munitions in Syria and then share that information, as well as some of the conflicts that still occur in that region. Democracy is the largest of the peace programs at the Carter Center. They currently have projects. One of them is digital threats that affect elections in Ethiopia, Myanmar, Cote d'Ivoire. We are one of the leaders in democratic election standards. We work with other international organizations for election monitoring. We have a project that focuses on violence against women during elections and around elections. And then in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as Liberia, we have long-term offices that focus on citizen observation activities. Over the years, the Carter Center has monitored 113 elections in the nations that are listed here. Now, when we're invited to do an election, we need to be invited by each of the political parties. And that's done so that they have an investment in what our findings are. So it really is a large operation. President Carter always says that human rights is the umbrella of everything that we do at the Carter Center. Currently, we have a project called Mobilizing Faith for Women and Girls that's based on a book that President Carter wrote a couple of years ago, A Call to Action, where they focus on the greatest human rights abuses in the world, and that they are directed at women and girls, both domestically as well as internationally. In addition, the Human Rights Program focuses on a mining and governance project that works to advance economic justice for the citizens in those countries and monitor mining practices and policies. Rule of Law program is based on the Right to Information Act. You as a citizen should be able to ask your government how money is spent, who the donors are, who owns property, how many votes someone received. All of that should be transparent. So the Rule of Law program, again, we're invited into a country. We're not there to say what should or should not occur. We have an assessment tool that will be used to measure how well their laws are living up to what their expectations are. And then we're going to support them in making those changes based on that feedback. Again, it's not what we feel they should do, but how well they're living up to those goals. We also have a project that has to do with the Right to Information Act for women in Guatemala specifically. And then there's a project in Liberia called Access to Justice that focuses a little bit more grassroots level, but works to strengthen the rule of law and educates police officers on victims' rights as well as the rights of the accused. About 70% of all of the resources of the Carter Center go to health programs. And here you can see the list of those programs and then the year that we started that project. If you know anything about Carter Center health programs, you may have heard about Guinea worm before. Guinea worm is a parasite that lives inside the human body. You get this parasite by drinking contaminated water that has water fleas ingested by the larvae that live in the water. You're going to drink that water from an open water source. You'll ingest it. The male and female will mate inside the stomach. The male will die, and the female will take up to, or anywhere from 10 to 14 months before she grows to full size. A female guinea worm can grow up to about 3 feet long. So that's roughly from your shoulder to your wrist. And again, you don't even realize that she lives there until she starts to emerge. If I can go back to this slide, what you see here is 2 different guinea worms that are emerging. One from the blister, the other is down in the lower left-hand corner, and it's being wrapped around a piece of gauze because they don't want it to contract back inside the body. It's a very painful and slow process. So to relieve the pain, people will get back into the water, which is exactly where that guinea worm wants to be. She wants to emerge from the body, lay her eggs, so that the next person who drinks from that water source is going to ingest it. And that really is the life cycle of the guinea worm. There is no antibiotic, no quick fix medicine. It's only through human behavior modification that we've worked toward eradicating this disease. Teaching people to filter their drinking water has been key to fighting this disease. Whether it's a large filter and using it in the jerry jar like you see on the right, or a small piece of that filter at the end of the personal pipe filter. It's like a necklace that they wear around their neck so that it's with them wherever they go. But using that water filter is going to screen out the little larvae so that you cannot ingest it. Through this low-cost, effective method, we've been very effective at minimizing guinea worm. When the Carter Center first started working on this disease, there were 3.5 million cases in 20 endemic countries. As you can see here, last year in 2020, there were exactly 27 cases, human cases in the world. Now we have suffered some setbacks because we have learned in recent years that guinea worm can be transmitted by dogs, cats, and even an occasional baboon. But we are still confident that guinea worm will be the second disease ever to be eradicated from the earth. Next up is trachoma. Trachoma is the leading cause of preventable blindness in the world. And oftentimes women are much more likely to get trachoma because the primary carriers are children. If you look at this photo, you can see the nasal and ocular discharge on this little boy's face, and then the flies that are drawn to that. What happens is that over time, with repeated exposure to trachoma, the inside of the eyelid is going to scar. It will cause the eyelashes to turn under, and those eyelashes eventually will cut into the cornea and cause blindness. It's incredibly painful. And once it happens completely, it is irreversible. The way that we address this is through the SAFE strategy, with a very minor surgery that can be done in a field hospital. They will invert the eyelid, make a small slit, and suture it to relieve that strain so that the eyelashes turn out. Next is antibiotics. Basic antibiotics that we take for granted in this country can be administered through a mass drug administration so that people can have that protection in advance. Next up is facial cleanliness. As you may recall, the flies on that little boy's face, if the face is clean, the flies are not drawn to it. And lastly is environmental hygiene. The flies that carry trachoma feed on human waste. So if people build and utilize latrines, they don't have access to that waste, and the fly population does not multiply nearly as fast. Next up is the mental health program. Mrs. Carter oversees the mental health program, and she has been a mental health advocate since before Jimmy Carter was president of the United States. Actually before he was governor. They work to destigmatize mental health and encourage people to seek treatment. When I started at the Carter Center, it was our only purely domestic program. But we had a long-term office in Liberia, and we could see that after all the years of civil war, there were a lot of people struggling with PTSD, but there was only one psychiatrist in the country. So we developed a program to work with healthcare clinicians to identify and treat mental health issues. My primary responsibility at the Carter Center is to oversee interns and graduate assistants. This is a group photo from when we were down in Plains, and you'll recognize the casually dressed man front and center. President Carter is with us there in Plains. We have 3 intern sessions a year, fall, spring, and summer. The fall and spring session is 15 weeks long. The summer session is 10 weeks long. And through each of these sessions, we take anywhere from 30 to 35 interns that work in all of these areas. In order to be eligible, you need to be a college junior, senior, a graduate student, or someone who's completed their degree within the last 24 months. This internship is currently an unpaid opportunity and will remain so during during the summer session, upcoming session. But as of this fall, I'm happy to tell you that that will change and this will become a paid internship. In addition to interns, we have graduate assistants that work in all of these areas. That's a 9 to 12 month position. But whether you're a graduate assistant or an intern, we like to offer support to our interns and graduate assistants through professional development opportunities, career workshops, off-site retreats, etc. We have a significant online presence. And I always recommend that people check out our YouTube channel because there's a lot of really good short videos that will give you more detail about the programs that I've touched upon. I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I think we'll probably turn it back to our coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. That was a wonderful presentation. And to everyone in the audience, we'll go to our next presentation from Harrison Welsheimer of the Peace Corps, and then we'll start the Q&A. You can type your questions in the chat box at any time. Okay, Harrison, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Diana. Something about me is I've always loved a really good story, and especially when they're true stories. Growing up, I was oddly attracted to biographies, and because they told true stories about people, and the ones that I really liked reading were about people who traveled the world or went to a new place, a place that was very different for them, and lived there and gained new perspectives, experienced new cultures, language, food, but then also new versions of themselves. Despite all this, I actually didn't stray too far from home. I grew up in Wyoming in a small town, and then went to college in Wyoming, and then got a job in my college town. And I was working for a number of years, and it was becoming clear that if I didn't do something fairly drastic, that this is where I was going to stay. And that's how I finally made a decision, and that's how I found myself about a year ago standing in a rice field in Cambodia, water up to my knees, kind of wondering what snakes were swimming around because I knew they were in the area. And my neighbor was teaching me how to hunt for crabs because that's what we were trying to have for dinner that night. I can say that Peace Corps, if it wasn't for Peace Corps, I wouldn't have had this incredible journey that allowed me to start making the most of my world. So as I said, I served in Cambodia, and Peace Corps, you have a job. It's a paid volunteer opportunity. They cover your expenses to and from country. You are there for 2 years and 3 months, and you get training for two or three of those months, and then you're at your permanent site for 2 years. I was an English teacher, and I taught incredible high schoolers and learned how to speak the local language, which is Khmer. The other aspect of my desire to join Peace Corps, of all these opportunities, including the Carter Center, what attracted me to the Peace Corps was one, the length of the service, and two, the mission. This idea that, Peace Corps has built relationships with these countries we serve in for some decades. So you aren't just showing up and a stranger. In fact, at my site in Cambodia, I was the 4th volunteer that had worked at the school I was working at. The other goals, about helping people around the world understand the unique views, everyone in America is unique, and sharing that with the rest of the world is really important. But I would also say equally important is that third goal, which is, as an American, leaving and understanding how amazing other people are around the world. And even if we go about things differently, we can still have so much in common. The only 2 requirements as a Peace Corps volunteer is that you're a US citizen and you're 18 years old. I can say that Peace Corps was the most diverse group of Americans I've ever gotten the pleasure to know. They became my best friends. We came from all over the United States. We were every ethnicity, religion, and we were very open. I think that was something very unique to the Peace Corps experience. Is you go abroad and you share things. At least in my group of friends in the Peace Corps, and I would say our cohort, which was about 66 volunteers, our group was especially open, and we talked about everything, from what was going on back home, our life experiences back home, to what we were experiencing in Cambodia. Hard conversations, some, but the most fulfilling conversations I've ever had. The other thing I want to point out is that despite being a very hard job, you are isolated, and at times it's hard to get places in some of these countries we serve. Therefore, you might not see another American for months. And despite all those hardships, 9 out of 10 volunteers think you should do it. I don't know too many workplaces where that's the case. Those jobs I was talking about, we have 6 sectors, and I was in education. I will say all of the sectors have an education component, but also with that said, some of these will have more structure, and some will have less. Education was fairly structured because I had a school to show up to. I had classes to teach. Something like agriculture is going to be a lot more grassroots. All the jobs are grassroots because you have to get to know your community and you need to become a trusted member, and that takes time. However, I'll say agriculture, environment are 2 that take longer because they don't have that structure where you're showing up to a place at a certain time. With all of that said, it's not a normal job. You don't clock in and you don't clock out. You can feel like you're working all the time, partially because you're in such a different place and your brain is always working. Not only are you seeing new things, hearing new sounds, eating new food, you're also learning a language, learning how to communicate, not just the words, but the customs, the body language. It's exhausting, but for me, it's exactly what I wanted. I just loved every second of that. Finally, I do want to mention, even though my day-to-day job was teaching English, I was getting involved in a secondary project that was actually about the environment. Our school, we didn't have a waste management system. In fact, in Cambodia, only the capital city, Phnom Penh, and maybe Siem Reap had, trash pickup. So in villages, it was often up to the community. And in our school, which was kind of a micro community inside my village, we decided to address the trash issue at our school. And that meant building actually an incinerator. That was the most environmentally friendly way to dispose of plastic. So guess what I'm saying is you might have one job and you might get involved in another job that is unrelated to your primary job. Before COVID, we were serving in many countries around the world, 63 in total. And we're looking at, we have good relationships with most of these countries still. I will be upfront and say COVID is definitely putting a strain on, I think, international relationships in every organization, not just Peace Corps. But our plan is to try and get back to the field in 2022. At this time, we don't have any volunteers in the field, and that's entirely due to COVID. But our target year is 2022 for a return. Of course, that can change with the virus changing, but that is our hope and that is our goal. I'm going to kind of breeze through these because while they're important, I also want to get to questions. I know there are a lot of you on this call. There are a lot of benefits during your service. Like I said, it is a paid volunteership. So for example, I lived with a host family and they were paid by Peace Corps to house me, but it didn't feel like I was a renter. I was definitely a part of their family. You get your medical and dental is 100% covered, which is amazing. I can't tell you how good it feels to know that if something goes wrong, it doesn't matter how bad it is, it's 100% covered. That means even if you have to stay in a hospital for a week in the capital, it's 100% covered. If you have student loans, you can look at them getting canceled or deferred. You get 2 days of vacation, just like, which is generous compared to most places in the United States. And you do get a lot of training and it's intense. PST, pre-service training, was for my group, it was 2 months, but it's 6 days a week, 8 hours a day of just in-class learning. Nothing happens without safety and health for volunteers. So you go through that training, you go through a lot of safety and health hours. There are protocols to follow, medical officers available. You call them any hour of the day or night and they'll pick up. I'll say the government support was huge. And then also dedicated victim advocacy. If anything were to happen, you have multiple levels of victim advocacy. The benefits aren't just during service. When you return home, you've been accruing each month during your service about $350. That's put away in an account for you. Upon completion of your service, that 2 years, it's paid to you in a lump sum. It comes out to about $10,000. That can be used for, obviously your flight is covered to get you back home. So that $10,000 is for you to transition back to American life. Graduate school benefits are huge. We'll cover that in a second. Also, these other two, networking, and this is a career day. So I do want to urge all of you as you're looking into your careers, meet the people that you want, that inspire you, and find out what did they do. Learn their life story and get to know them, because networking is such a critical component to finding work. And when you're a Peace Corps volunteer, you become part of a very broad network. Peace Corps volunteers work in massive corporations. They work for non-government organizations. I'm sure there are a number working potentially for the Carter Center. They work for the United Nations. They work at the State Department. We work everywhere. And if you've served, you automatically will have a conversation with a Peace Corps volunteer, because that intense experience is a bonding experience as well. So it doesn't matter if that volunteer served 20 years before you did. If you've both served, it's a conversation. Graduate school, it's becoming a more common thing for Americans to attend graduate school. We have a partnership through the Coverdell Fellows Program with 100 universities, more than 200 programs, and at least 25% off. You do apply for the Coverdell, but you have your entire life. It's a lifetime eligibility. So if you don't get it, you can apply again the next year. Some of these programs are 100% covered. This is a little bit about the application. I'll not spend too much time here. Right now, just know if you were to apply, we're gathering applications, and as soon as we know where we're going, where we're returning to, we'll email you and say, would you be willing to consider going to this country at this time? Because we have your application and we think you'd be a good fit. As the world starts to conquer COVID and things people start moving around the world again more fluidly, we're hoping to go back to the model where, we know when we're leaving, we know when you would arrive in the country, and you could apply to specific jobs at specific times. Right now, we're having to adapt. Just a quick couple pictures. This was my cohort, and it was right before we were shipping out. We were about to get on the airplane. This is in Washington, D.C. We look so clean. I will say I sweat a lot in Cambodia, and I think this was the cleanest I was until I came back. But I was learning. My body was adapting. I was sweating less and less as time went on. I love being active, so that also made me sweat a lot. During training, this is that top left picture, played soccer with these kids, and every chance we got, every break we had, 15 minutes, we'd run out on the basketball court and play soccer. They didn't really play basketball, but they played soccer a lot. The bottom left, I had another project, which was to train my host family's dogs. They wanted dogs, but they didn't really train them, so they would jump on you every time you got anywhere near, and it was slightly annoying. So I was like, I'm going to train them how to not do that anymore. So this was actually a training session. And then that far right, I had one 7th grade class. And what I loved about Cambodia was everything was kind of an opportunity to problem solve. Cambodians are really ingenious problem solvers with limited resources. And in this case, this was actually a problem I created. In Cambodia, the culture is to these are little things you learn. You learn so many little things, but they believe that the students should have the key to the classroom because it teaches maturity. You're in charge of the classroom. Well, a couple funny things would happen. If the student who had the key for the classroom didn't show up for school that day, you didn't have class, or you would spend 15 minutes trying to get a hold of that student so they would get to class so you could open the classroom. And in this case, I had an idea with 7th graders. They loved any kind of game. And I was like, well, let's go outside and we're going to play a game that incorporates English. Well, I'm pretty sure another student thought it would be funny to lock the padlock on the door while all our stuff was in there and we were outside. And of course, the key is in a student's backpack. So the boys here with that pole are trying to reach that backpack. And one of the things that I really love just about kind of being there was the boys were ecstatic, jumping up and down to solve this problem. And all of the girls were so annoyed and looking at me like, what did you do, teacher? But yeah, just a really hilarious moment. They did get the key. It took about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but it just moments like this all the time that brought a lot of joy to my service. With that said, I do want to just have a slide here with my contact info. Please feel free to reach out to me, and love to set up a conversation to share more, and also connect you with other volunteers who so they can share their experience. I'll say that about Peace Corps is everyone does have a unique experience, and it isn't all roses. It wasn't always easy, and I think there's hardship in every experience, but at the end, all of it mixed together, it's been worth it. And I think most of us who have served believe it was absolutely worth it. But with that said, I'm happy to connect you with other volunteers as well, so you can hear more than just my story.
Thank you, Harrison. It looks like such an amazing experience, and thank you for sharing your stories with us. We will start with the Q&A. I'm going to start off with a question, a general question for both of you. Well, actually, I'm going to start with Harrison first, and then we'll go to Lauren. But Harrison, I wanted to ask you, what was your biggest takeaway from your experience in Cambodia, and what did you learn about life and living and working in another country that you can share with our audience today?
Actually, Ashley in the chat box just asked about language, and I'd say that was the most critical component. Regardless of, everyone had their individual challenges as part of service. We're all different people, and that really does come out when you're far from home. However, I think something we all struggled with in general was communication barriers. When you leave the capital, Phnom Penh, you could kind of get around with English. But once you left the capital city, the number of English speakers was very small. So you needed to learn in your village, especially where you lived. If you were to build relationships, you needed to learn the language. So yes, as part of our training, we did about 50% was language training. So 6 days a week, 4 hours a day of intense. And then you lived with a host family during that training. So you were practicing, not just learning, but practicing. I will say I just knew how important that was. So I took tutors. I took hours of lesson training during the week after training at my permanent site. And I'll say that was one of my big takeaways. If you really want to get to know a place, throw yourself into the language.
And a related question to language I see from Carissa. If you are bilingual, does Peace Corps take that into account when deciding where to send a volunteer?
Yes. Yeah. Especially if you express interest in serving in a country that speaks that language, they will do their best to place you in that country. You're welcome.
Great. A lot of questions about language, but I think you answered those. Another question about post-volunteer positions and opportunities. It says if one applies with the State Department after they have finished a Peace Corps volunteer position, are their applications given a priority?
Yes. And I'm actually curious to hear from Lauren too on this, like what do interns do after Carter Center? Peace Corps, yeah, you do get non-competitive eligibility. And that's actually how I got this job. It helped me get this government job. So yes, and I have a friend who she works for the State Department who was a Peace Corps volunteer, and that helped her get that State Department job. It's called non-competitive eligibility. But I will say it is a sacrifice to serve, right? You could probably enter the corporate world or private sector and right out of college and start making money sooner. And so know that there is sacrifice you make, but you aren't left with just this experience and nothing to return home to. There are some very good benefits for your career in the long run.
Great, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. Lauren, I wanted to get you into the conversation as well. If you could talk more about the internship program at the Carter Center, and if you could tell us more about what kind of qualifications the Carter Center is looking for when selecting interns, and what students can expect to do if they are selected for an internship.
Thanks, that's a great question. And to go back, Harrison alluded to it earlier, there is a lot of overlap between Carter Center staff and Peace Corps. We have lots of examples of people who either do Peace Corps before they come to us or do Peace Corps after. But in regard to the Carter Center internships, I think that what we're looking for, I think most is a sincere interest in the area that they're going to be working in. We have internships in 14 different areas of the Carter Center. And I think that, oftentimes people say, well, what major do I need to have? That part, I mean, that's great, but what we really want is somebody who feels strongly about that topic area, is interested in learning more, doesn't need to know all the answers before they come to us. On the application, we do ask for a writing sample, and I think that's one of the key pieces of the application. It can be something that you've written for an academic paper. You can even truncate the paper, but it needs to be something that will showcase your research and analysis, because a lot of the internship is just that, research, providing research and analysis for the staff, or for yourself. But it is an integral part of what we do, and that's really going to be important.
And a follow-up question, Lauren, are all of the positions here in Atlanta?
Well, typically that answer is yes. All of the internships are based here in Atlanta. But since March of last year, we've been doing the internship virtually. So right now I have 2 interns that are in China, 1 that is in the UK. I have 3 that are out on the West Coast. We had to pivot, and that's the way that it's been working for us. I anticipate that we will continue to be virtual at least through the summer session. Somebody was asking me yesterday about a graduate assistant position for the 21-22 academic year. And I said, if I knew the answer to that, wouldn't I be? That decision has not yet been made. But the Carter Center isn't even looking at going back yet for quite some time. And when we do, that will be slow and on a voluntary basis. And I don't anticipate that it will include interns and graduate assistants initially.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask another general question, and then I will start going to these questions in the chat box. I wanted to know about your perceptions of intercultural fluency, and how important is it for students to be able to work with people in other cultures and to communicate, communicate and work with people in from other backgrounds than themselves.
That's just a wide open one. I think that it's important. On our application, we ask if you have language skills. It's not a requirement, but that certainly adds a lot to your application. Depending on which languages or what language it is, if it's a country where we're working, maybe somebody who speaks German is not going to, that's not necessarily an area that we're focused on. But the languages that we're most interested in are Arabic, Spanish, and French. There is also, I'll also add Mandarin to that as well.
Thank you. Harrison, do you want to speak about intercultural fluency and languages, preferred languages?
For me, I think it's, for my experience in Cambodia, just tip of the iceberg. COVID has been tough for everyone around the world. And I think there are a couple ways to look at it. It's isolated, I think, countries in many ways, and the people that live in those countries. And yet, I think isolation is what causes global conflict. So living in a place, even if you don't agree necessarily with the overall politics, perhaps, of that country, you live with the people and you realize, wow, there's so much more that unites us than divides. And cliche as that sound, it's so true. In Cambodia, I found that living with my host family, I would get frustrated just by the way things were done, but I realized the essence of what was happening was just what I would do here. And it was always just a great reminder of, like, I do the same things back in America. They just look a little different. And so that was, yes, very individual, but I think that is a key to to resolving global conflict is if you can remember that, even when you come back home, if you're involved in your communities or you become involved in politics, you're going to carry that forward. And then finally, I'll say it's a lifelong. You don't just do it once and think, okay, I got it, and now I have it figured out. It's, if anything, I learned is that I need to go back. I need much more time than I've had.
Thank you for that. So I'm going back to the beginning of the chat and to ask again, and again, it's a language question, but Harrison, is there a language test? For instance, if you're deemed not ready to speak the language, will your trip be stripped? So I think it means if you're not ready to speak the language of your country that you're going to be assigned to, what will the Peace Corps do? Will they take your position away?
No, they won't. I was someone who was not spectacular with the language at first. You do have a competency test that you need to pass before at the end of your training. However, if you do not pass it, you will just be required to sign up for a tutor at your site. So you'll continue to move forward. And honestly, even though I had passed it, I paid for 2 tutors, which Peace Corps reimburses you for. So no, it's not a deterrent. You'll just test again. And there might be a conversation if you fail the second test where like, hey, we need to try something different. But I didn't experience hearing any of my colleagues having a hard time passing the second time. The test was laid out. It wasn't just, hey, let's just throw you in and start speaking. It was, you knew what you were going to talk about and you could generally prepare for it. So yeah, Peace Corps is not going to shorten your service because you've failed the language proficiency test.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, I'm going to direct the next question to you. Since the Carter Center is so diverse in how it approaches its mission, what lessons do you hope your interns walk away with regardless of their role?
I think that the internship, a big part of it is just getting some experience. A lot of times people will say, well, I think I want to get a master's in this degree, or I might want to get a job in this area. It's career clarification. What kinds of things are you really interested in? And I think it's also important to learn that everybody has a role to play and that your work is valuable. One of my favorite Carter stories, and I have several, is I can remember President Carter had received a briefing about Jordan. This was several years ago. And he was so struck by it, he said, I'd like to thank the intern that wrote this. Well, the staff member reached out, tried to find the intern. She felt like she was being summoned and was worried. He just wanted to say thank you. I mean, it was the sense of your contribution makes a difference. And that's, the feedback that the intern had was, if I would have known President Carter was going to read this, I would have done a better job. Well, the goal is always for President Carter to read it, or for the CEO to read it, or, the Vice President of Health or Peace or whatever. But it's that sense that what you do matters and that people value what you're working on.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the questions about sort of diverse representation for volunteers in the Peace Corps, but also for interns at the Carter Center. There's a question here about opportunities for LB. Sorry, now I'm missing my place. For LGBTQ communities. Are there opportunities there? Are there things that students should be aware of? Also, students from underrepresented communities here in the States. Are there opportunities and diversity programs at the Peace Corps, and are you looking for those kinds of candidates?
Yeah, I do want to address Joseph and Ashton's questions about discrimination. Uh, I'll say this, that in our cohort, the American volunteers, and this is what I was referring to earlier, like it was the most diverse group of Americans I've ever worked with. And I learned for the first time in my life about my privilege. You know, I'm a white, I identify white cisgender male, and it's the first time in my life where I had conversations about privilege. That was incredibly important, and it's something that I am continuing to work on. So, but within your cohort, there is that intensity of relationship makes those conversations happen. However, with the host country nationals, I will say my friend who identifies as a Black woman, she struggled because Cambodia can be very racist at times. They would talk about her skin color, and it really bothered her, understandably so. So yes, and that was in Cambodia, and that is a common theme throughout Peace Corps countries. They identify a lot by the way you look. And I had other friends who were told, "You're not American. You're American? You don't look American," because they think they all look white and have a certain appearance. So that is a challenge, absolutely. And Peace Corps we have a support network inside that. That is with the other volunteers. We have like actual groups where you call certain volunteers who that's kind of their area of expertise, is to have those conversations. But honestly, also your friends. Like, so Lily and I were really good friends, and so we talked about it a lot. Even though we were hours away from each other, we spoke on the phone at least 3-4 times a week. So, and then I do want to address Joseph's question about the LGBTQ plus community. Cambodia was a really conservative, socially conservative country. And I do have friends who identify as LGBTQ plus that they were out to us, but they did not feel comfortable coming out to their families. One volunteer who had been there in the cohort before us and had been there for a year and a half or so did come out to his family, but he said it took a year for him to be willing to do that. So there are challenges for sure. And I don't want to say that, gloss over them. And I do also want to say, I dropped my email in the chat. If you want to speak with someone who identifies similar to you, I know you can have much more candid conversations, so I'd be happy to put you in touch.
Thank you so much, Harrison. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that? And similarly, there's some questions about international students as well. Is there a requirement that you must be a US citizen to apply for the Carter Center?
No, there is no requirement for citizenship to be a Carter Center intern. Now, because the internship is part-time, I can no longer sponsor people. We used to be able to do that through Emory University, since we're affiliated with Emory for the internship. However, if you are studying here in the US, we would welcome that. And obviously for our full-time positions, we have a lot of international staff as well.
Thank you very much. I see a similar question about dual citizenship, but I imagine that's the same. Wonderful. I am a freshman and I'm interested in interning at the Carter Center later in my college career. Is there anything I should strive for in order to better my application other than the writing sample?
We're looking for somebody with a good all-round application, because the application is going to ask for the writing sample. It asks what you're hoping to gain from the internship. But as a freshman, you've got a little bit of time yet. I would encourage you to not just take all the generalist courses, but try and take a course in international relations, or I don't know if you're interested in peace or health, but the connection between peace and health there is no difference in many ways. I get a lot of people from public health degree who are working in peace programs as well. I would say stay current with international affairs, watch what, keep an eye on Carter Center programs and what we're doing. You can even sign up to get, updates and things like that, but just try to expand your areas of interest. And then if there is a particular area that you feel like you're more interested in, take a course that gets a little bit more narrow on that so that you can deep dive and sort it out. It doesn't have to be a program that the Carter Center necessarily has, something that's directly related. But again, something where you have the opportunity to develop your research skills. All of those are a plus.
Wonderful. And I'm going to take it, this is for both of you. I know you are mostly focused on undergraduate and master's students. What opportunities are available for PhD students, and how can I research those?
Oh, I did want to address Alex's question. Alex, I don't know about the dual citizenship. There are certain restrictions depending on what that second country is. But so I'll just, for example, one of my colleagues was Ukrainian, was born in Ukraine and American. He could not serve in Ukraine because as a dual citizen, they could actually conscript him to the Ukrainian military, and the United States government, because he was a volunteer, he would not have immunity if Ukraine found out that he was a dual citizen and conscripted him to the military. So I am not sure what, for your dual citizenship, what that restriction may be, but he was still able to serve. He just couldn't serve in Ukraine. So absolutely, I know there would be a way for you to serve with dual citizenship. It just might not be in certain countries. But again, for him, it was only Ukraine. He could go anywhere else. And then on the PhD's question from Marie, absolutely. I worked for 10 years before joining Peace Corps. I was, a lot of our applicants are right out of undergraduate programs, but I think experience can help you a lot in your service because, just maturity. We grow up and you kind of know yourself, and that does give you a little bit more to offer your community. So absolutely, if you're a PhD or you've been working for some time, I will say life happens. It gets harder the longer you wait or work, but I still think the plunge was worth it for me.
And Lauren, do you quickly want to respond to the PhD question?
Yeah, we do have some opportunities for PhD students. We have 2 of our graduate assistants right now are PhD students. I think that the challenge is to identify a project that's going to be of enough challenge for them. We certainly don't disqualify for them. I always want people to look at their internship experience and say, yes, that was a good use of my time. So you want to be selective and you want to be sure that it is something that's going to reflect well on your research. But yes, we've had several PhD students.
Thank you. And we are coming to the end of our program. So I know that we didn't address all of the questions that are here. Thank you so much for your answers. If you have more questions or if your questions were not answered, we can put the email addresses in the chat box so that you can contact the speakers directly. Lauren and Harrison, if you don't mind putting your email addresses in there. Thank you to everyone who attended today. It was wonderful to hear about the Peace Corps and the Carter Center, 2 wonderful organizations. I do hope that you all will join us next week. Next Thursday, we will have the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Agency for International Development. So please use the QR code and register for those events. We look forward to seeing you then. Lauren and Harrison, thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful to hear about your organizations and all the great work that you are doing. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.